أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Mediation Analysis SEMinR series. In this session we are going to talk about how to perform mediation analysis in R using SEMinR package. Introduction. Mediation occurs when a construct referred to as your mediator construct intervenes between two related constructs. Now, more precisely, a change in the exogenous construct causes a change in the mediator construct, which in turn results in change in the endogenous construct in the PLS path model. When such an effect is present, mediation can be useful statistical analysis if supported by theory and carried out properly. Consider this figure for illustration of mediating effect in terms of direct and indirect effects. A direct effect describes the relationship linking two constructs with a single arrow. Now this is your direct relationship. y1, y3, y1, y2, y2, y3. There are no mediators in between. Indirect effects are those structural model paths that involve a sequence of relationship with at least one intervening construct. Now look at this. There is a sequence of relationship between y1, y2 and y3. y1 influences y2, y2 influences y3. So your y2 is your mediator construct or mediating variable. In this case, we only have one intervening construct, but there could be more than one. An indirect effect is a sequence of two or more direct effects, in this case y1 to y2, y2 to y3, and is represented visually by multiple arrows. Look at this, arrow flowing from y1 to y2, then y2 to y3. Figure shows both a direct effect, that is P3 between y1 and y3, that is, this is your direct effect, and indirect effect of y1 on y3. y1 and y3, the effect is indirect through y2, because y1 is influencing y2 and y2 is influencing y3. And mediation will help you assess whether there is an indirect effect of y1 on y3 through y2. The indirect effect computed as the product of P1 here, the direct effect between y1 and y2, and direct effect from y2 to y3. Now this will give you the mediating effect. Now finally, the sum of direct and indirect effect is referred to as total effect. So the impact of y1 on y3, that is your path P2, and the indirect effect that you got from multiplying P1 with P2, the sum of both will give you the total effect. Now, in order to know more about mediation, what is mediation, and these direct-indirect effects, I've done a video and you can watch it on my channel. The link will be shared in the description. Systematic mediation analysis. Evaluation of the mediation model. Now, evaluating a mediation model requires all quality criteria of measurement and structural models to be met. Now, as discussed in the previous sessions, the analysis begins with the assessment of reflective formative measurement model. Now, before you go on and assess the mediation role of the mediating variable, you need to assess or evaluate your measurement model, whether it's reflective or formative, as we have done in previous sessions. For example, a lack of reliability for one or more reflective mediator constructs will have a meaningful impact on the estimated relationship in the PLS path model. That is, the indirect effects can be considerably smaller than expected if you do not check your constructs for reliability. Now, for this reason, it is very important to ensure that the reflectively measured mediator constructs exhibit a high level of reliability. Now, after establishing the reliability and validity of measurement models for the mediator as well as the other exogenous and endogenous construct, it is now important to consider all structural model evaluation criteria that we did in previous sessions. You have to check for collinearity, you will have to assess for explanatory power and the structural relationships as well. High collinearity must not be present since it is like to produce biased path coefficient. Now it is important to check for high collinearity. For example, as a result of collinearity, the direct effect may become insignificant, suggesting the absence of mediation even though, for example, complementary mediation may be present. Likewise, high collinearity levels may result in unexpected sign changes, rendering any differentiation between different mediation types problematic. Moreover, a lack of the mediator construct's discriminant validity with the exogenous or endogenous construct might result in a strong and significant but substantially biased indirect effect, consequently leading to incorrect implications regarding the existence of or type of mediation. Now, after meeting the relevant assessment criteria for reflective and formative measurement model, as well as a structural model by testing the collinearity and other required statistics, the actual mediation analysis follows. Mediation analysis procedure. Now, what is the procedure of mediation analysis? Is P1 and P2 significant? Now, yes, they are significant. Then assess, is P3 significant? That is the direct relationship from your independent variable to your dependent variable, whereas P1 is your relationship from independent to mediator and P2 is your relationship from mediator to dependent. If P3 is significant, now we check for complementary or competitive mediation. Now if P1, P2 and P3, all of them are positive, you've got complementary partial mediation. Otherwise, you've got competitive partial mediation. Again, if P3 is not significant, you've got full mediation. That is, your direct effect is insignificant and all the influence is passing on the dependent variable through the mediator. But what if your P1 and P2 are insignificant? That is no. Then is P3 significant? Then there is only a direct only relationship. And if your P3 is not significant, that is your direct relationship between independent variable and dependent variable, then there is no effect, no mediation whatsoever. So this is the model that we are going to test as part of this illustration. Now we expect collaborative culture to mediate between vision and organizational performance. So we've got a very simple model. I'm going to test more complex mediation models later. To begin with mediation analysis, we need to ensure that all constructs are reliable and valid and that the structural model meets all the quality criteria as we have just discussed. Now, as we have conducted these evaluations in the previous session, we can now directly move to the mediation analysis. Now, you have to refer back to the previous session on evaluating your reflective model or formative model and evaluation of your structural model. In this session, we are going to focus on mediation analysis. Now, the first step is to test for significance of the relevant indirect effects, whether the influence of vision on organizational performance through collaborative culture is significant or not. This is the first step. That is, your P1 and P2 are significant or not. To test for significance of these path coefficients, we first need to estimate and bootstrap the model and summarize the results. So we are going to use the same procedure till bootstrapping the results and getting the summary out of those results. Now what's the code? Again, we load our data, we specify our measurement model, we create our structural model. Again, vision to organizational performance, that is your direct effect, vision to collaborative culture, IV to mediator, and then collaborative culture to organizational performance, that is your mediator to your dependent variable. Just the three paths as identified in the last slide. Now estimate your model, the measurement model. Now summarize the results and put them in this summary object. Check for the iterations, they should not be over 300. And then bootstrap your model. What do you want to bootstrap? You want to bootstrap your estimated model, simple underscore model, and these are the properties I'm going to set. And then put the summary of the bootstrapped model into summary underscore boot. And then we will do our mediation. But before that, let's run our code. So I'm just going to run this code here. I'm going to select it all here and copy. I've got it here, but let me run it again so that if there are any errors, we can correct them. And let's select it all, run it. Now let's have a look at the previous. Okay, there is no issue. Okay, So there are no issues. Let's see what we get in our bootstrapping model SEMinR. Okay, and it did run successfully, and now we've got our results in summary_boot, and we've got our results in summary_simple. So next step, let's do our next step. So this is the illustration. Let's briefly discuss this. Now the results of total indirect effects can be found in inspecting total indirect effects element within the summary_model object, summary_model, and total indirect effects. Now the first step is to assess whether or not your indirect effects are significant or not. So where are your indirect effects? They are in summary_model object. So where is it? Let's have a look. So I'm just going to copy this here. And this is going to give me the total indirect effects. Now this is just fine when you've got one mediator. But if you've got more than one mediator, we need specific indirect effects. But we are going to look into that later as well. So let's run this, run it, and look at this here. So the indirect effect from vision to organizational performance is 0.165. But is it significant? Now my interest is in assessing whether this effect is significant or not. Now since we had only one mediator, so we've got only one indirect effect from vision to organizational performance. We are going to have multiple examples with multiple mediators as well. So how do you assess these specific indirect effects? Now this was the total effect. In this case, the total effect, total indirect effect, and the specific indirect effect would be the same. But in case you've got multiple mediators, then there are different effects. Now let's briefly discuss the remaining theory as well. So specific indirect effects paths can be evaluated using this particular function. So this will take the bootstrapped model object. So where is your bootstrapped model object? If you go here, here is your bootstrapped model. Now specific indirect effects will take these arguments here. So this is the model, boot_model, that is boot_SEMinR_model, then comma, then your exogenous variable, then your mediator, then your dependent variable, and then your alpha value. So how do you check it? Let's come back here. In this case, we only had one mediator. So we're just going to put it in. Okay, it's better to write it like this when you, okay, do not put in too much spaces. Now specific indirect effect or specific effects significance, and that is for which model? Bootstrapped model. Now this is your bootstrapped model, and now it is from vision to collaborative culture to organizational performance, where collaborative culture is your mediator that is identified through this argument. Let's run it. Now look at this. Is this effect, indirect effect, significant? Yes, it's significant. It is greater than 1.96. And look at this, there is no zero in between. So we can say yes, collaborative culture mediates between vision and organizational performance. Now that we know that your indirect effect is significant, now the next step is to identify whether the direct effects were significant or not, in order to assess whether or not the mediation was complete or partial. So let's briefly discuss this theory. Now following the mediation analysis procedure, we can now ascertain if the direct effect is significant for mediation effect. That is, whether or not the mediation is partial or complete or full mediation. So in order to do this, now that we know that the indirect effect is significant, we now need to know whether the direct effect, that is from vision to organizational performance, was significant or not. Now if both paths are significant, this is partial mediation. However, if the direct path is insignificant, this is full mediation. So how do we do this? Let's run it. Let's copy this. So the first step is your indirect effect, which was significant. Now let's have a look at this, the direct path. Let's see, let's run it. So the direct effect from vision to organizational performance is this. Is it significant? Now let's look at the bootstrap paths from bootstrap model summary, vision to organizational performance. Well, it is significant. There is no zero in between. Now look at the path, 0.479, quite good. Look at the t statistics. Yes, it is significant. Now if we have a look, the indirect effect, here it is, was significant. Look at this, the direct path is significant. So both your direct effect and indirect effects are significant. So this is partial mediation. Now the results in figure show that direct effect, that is vision to organizational performance, is 0.479, and there is no zero in between the 95% confidence interval. And now we can easily say that this is partial mediation. Now moving on, as we did earlier, the next step is whether it was competitive or complementary mediation. We now need to further evaluate if collaborative culture acts as a complementary or competitive mediator for the effect of vision on organizational performance. Now to do so, we need to determine whether the product of the direct and indirect effect, that is P1, P2 and P3, have a positive or negative sign. Now to show these paths, we use path element of summary underscore simple. So summary underscore simple object has this path subobject. So what we need to do is we just simply multiply the three paths. And if the result is positive, this is complementary mediation. If the result is negative, that is there are different signs, this is competitive mediation. How to do this? This is simple. Let's copy. And look at this. P1. What is P1? It is the path from vision to organizational performance. Now, if you want specific paths in your structural model, this is the syntax. Now previously we have used this, that is summary underscore simple, that is your object holding the summary, then $, then paths. So now which paths do you want? I want these paths multiplied by the other paths multiplied by the last P3. And now let's have a look here. So this will give me each path in my structural model. Let's go here and let's run this and let's see what we get here. Just run it and it is positive. So it's a complementary mediation. Let's come back here. And finally, the specific, this is a tip, the specific effect significance can be used for calculating bootstrapped mean, standard deviation, t-statistic, bootstrap confidence interval for path involving multiple mediators, as we did earlier. I'm going to give you a detailed example of this in the next session. Now moving on, this is just a review of the mediation code. This code will be available on my website as well. So first you call in the library, load your data, specify your measurement model. Again, I've just taken one as your formative model, then create your structural model. Now look at this, we've got multiple paths as we did in the diagram earlier. Here, look at this one, or you can say this one. Now this is your P1, P2 and P3. Now we've got bootstrap models, then the storage, as we've done all of this earlier. Now the interesting part here was that you have to inspect your indirect effects first. So where is your specific indirect effects? Now in order to get your specific indirect effects, what you do is this is your total indirect effect. And once that is done, you see or look into your specific indirect effect. From that is your IV, that is your mediator, and that is your DV. And then you can have other specific indirect effects as well. Now this code is for with multiple mediators. Obviously this will be in the next session. Now again, direct effects, indirect effects, but the interesting thing is here, I want to show this here again, plot models. Let's do this again. To assess the complementary or competitive mediation, we are going to multiply the three signs. Now how to do this with multiple mediators? In the next session, I'm going to focus on just the code here and with multiple mediators. Now get the plots because we like our plots. Let's do this. Let's get the boot underscore model, that is bootstrapped model plot. Now look at this, your IV, your mediator and your dependent variable. And if you want to zoom, you can zoom as well. Now let's move it here, and look at this now. Significant, significant, significant. So your collaborative culture mediates the relationship between your IV and DV. I hope the basic concept on how to use mediation analysis in SEMinR package is now clear. In the next section, I'm going to have multiple mediators and we will look into how to have or how to assess multiple mediators using SEMinR. Thank you very much.